Alright, we should be pretty much live at this point. Just give it a second to load up here on my YouTube screen. For anybody who can hear me, I'm about to go live with Milk Jar's twin brother. Just setting up some of the initial live streaming features. Want to make sure that the quality of the stream is nice and good, and then we're going to go ahead and jump into our discussion with the notorious one, Milk Jar's twin brother. So quality of the stream is looking pretty good right now, and we will keep an eye on it. But for now, we shall jump in and introduce today's guest. Well, there he is, ladies and gentlemen, Milk Jar's twin brother. So what's up, dude? How you been?
I've been good. Yeah, my twin brother Milk Jar got banned from YouTube.
Oh, what a
He,
shame, dude. That's crazy.
yeah, he's not allowed to have any more YouTube accounts or Google accounts or anything
Oh my God.
ever again in his life.
Okay.
Um, so as his twin brother, I've decided to um, take over for him.
Okay, great. Great. The health of the live stream is pretty good. What's up, everybody in the chat? Be sure to leave any messages, any questions you guys might have for Milk Jar. Milk Jar is basically going to be explaining to me today.
Twin brother.
Oh, yes, my bad. Milk Jar's twin brother is going to be explaining to me today basically, why he's convinced that plants can feel. I'm holding a head of broccoli right here. As you guys can see, I'm holding a head of broccoli. And I guess, according to Milk Jar's twin brother, I mean, this inanimate, though clearly lifelike in the sense that, a plant will start off as a small little bud and then it'll spring and forward and it'll blossom. It'll go through a form of plant puberty, and then eventually it'll die and it'll smell like a decaying life form. It'll smell bad. I guess in some ways you could say that plants are living, but are plants sentient? But do plants feel? But can plants suffer? So that is basically the question. Milk Jar's twin brother, you're very convinced that plants can feel, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, tell me why the hell you believe something that is it's definitely not a normal concept, not something a lot of people think would be true. Tell me why you think it's true that plants can feel.
Well, normal mainstream society isn't convinced of that, but at this point in, botany, um, in the science community for that, they have pretty much all accepted that plants, you know, have just as complex, if not more complex, thought patterns as animals do.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, basically anything you could say in terms of why animals are conscious, it would be true for plants as well. And I don't know where to start. I mean, maybe you could kind of start it off by saying why you think, like an example of how an animal is conscious and a plant isn't.
Mm. Well, number one, I'm very much open to the idea that plants can feel. Um, I've read books going back years now that talk about plant perception, including that guy who did some of those original works with the polygraph, attaching them to plants, and the plants seem to react in certain ways where the polygraph would react if he clipped the polygraph to the plants. So, um, you know,
Yeah, that was Baxter, and
hmm
that was like the beginning of all this, and it's like basically this. It's like the Stone Age of plant consciousness research,
right,
but
right.
it's gone a lot further than that. since then.
Right. Well, let me ask you a quick question. I mean, if plants can feel, would you say that basically debunks veganism?
I mean, it depends on if you're coming from an ethical perspective
Yeah.
or a nutritional perspective.
Right.
But for me, the nutritional aspect was more important. But
So wait, so let me
yeah,
ask. So let me ask you. I mean, when you say plants can feel, like I'm holding up a big fucking head of broccoli right now.
well, it's
So,
dead.
so I'm gonna punch the broccoli like right here, right now. Like I'm literally gonna like I'm punching it right now. Like I'm literally punching the fucking head of broccoli. So my question is, if they can feel, do they feel? Do you think that plants feel? Do you think that plants feel in exactly the same way that a mammal can feel pain, or is it something
No,
completely different? Because plants are very different from mammals. They're very different from humans. So if they do feel and suffer, I would imagine that it would be a very different type of feeling and suffering. What do you think?
yeah, well, plants, first of all, don't have organs. So that's, the beginning of the differences. So they absolutely don't feel pain the same way we do.
Mm-hmm.
But if you define pain as just a an organism's uh, sensing of a danger to its existence,
Mm-hmm.
then yes, plants do um, interpret stimuli, which um, comes from things that are dangerous to its continued life. It interprets them and reacts to them when it can.
Right. Um,
I mean, would you agree on that definition of pain?
um, I mean, yeah, generally. Yeah, I mean, whether or not there's, maybe some differences in, how plants versus mammals feel it, but generally I can agree with that definition.
Yeah, and an important thing to note is the reason that we as humans are detached from plants' experiences of pain. It stems from something called plant blindness, and it's just something that we have in our ways of perceiving the world, which it kind of filters out all plants in a scene and only focuses on animals.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, like there was this one study where they just had pictures of animals in in nature environments surrounded by plants, and the animals in the picture were always um, they were always 20% or less of the image. And the experiment was they just showed people these pictures and asked what they saw. And every time they would say, I see a deer, or I see an elk, or a frog. And like every single time, that's the answer they would give. But meanwhile, 80% of the image was plants. So you could see an image and it'll be 80% plants, and there's an animal in it, and automatically your brain just, where the plants are, it just sees nothing.
Mm.
It just sees animals because, you know, it would be sensory overload if we were in a forest and, forest is nothing, there's just plants everywhere.
Mm.
If we, kind of processed the data of all the plants in our field of vision, it would just overload us. So our brains just filter all that out and we only see animals.
So you're basically
And
saying that's sort of like a human bias or a mammal bias, like we just kind of
yeah,
exclude.
it's necessary because it would be very hard for us to function
Okay.
if we had to process the data of all the
Right.
plants.
So what's the point there? Is the point there that we already have a sort of presumption about plant life that
Yeah,
yeah.
that's yeah, it's just this concept of plants, just being inanimate automatons.
Mm,
Um, it just comes from, just an inherent bias in our
sure.
perception that's required for us to efficiently survive in a natural
So let
environment.
me ask you, do you think there's a difference between, let's say, the mango tree and the mango fruit that falls off of the tree? Do you think the fruit is also living, or is it just a
Uh,
tree?
it's living until it falls off the tree.
So wait, when it falls off the tree, you think the mango is no longer feeling a feeling thing?
I'm not sure if, I mean, whether or not, like, the plant, like the tree feels what happens to the fruit while it's still connected.
Mm,
Regardless of that, I mean, if the plant perceived, like a monkey ripping the fruit off his branch, I don't know. I don't think it would perceive that as pain because that's what the tree wants the monkey to do, to disseminate the seeds.
mm.
So at the
So
same
wait,
time,
so within the bounds of your logic, would eating if vegans just let's just say vegans only ate mangoes, if they only ate mangoes, would that be hurting trees or would that be a violation of trees?
um, if they were only eating organic, like truly organic mangoes, it wouldn't be. But if the mango they're eating was coming from, a mango tree that was sprayed with pesticides, um, during the farming process, then that would be, quite cruel to the tree.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So, what about a carrot? I mean, okay, so I mean, do carrots grow out of, carrots grow out of the dirt, right? Like they're not like they're not dangling off trees, right?
Yeah, when you eat a carrot, that's you're just like you're killing the carrot and destroying its life by pulling it out of the ground.
Okay.
Like all root vegetables, carrots,
Potatoes.
potatoes, all that, you're just basically, I mean, yeah, you have to kill it to harvest it.
Yeah. Okay, so with the carrot, okay, interesting. So the carrot, so the carrot, you feel like that is basically probably, presumably against the will of the carrot. Um,
Of course, I mean, why would the carrot want to die?
right. And this has to do basically with the fact that it doesn't have a seed that can be spread out. Like, for example, in the case of a mango tree, it might like people picking the mangoes out of the tree because then it could drop the seed a few miles away and then that becomes a mango tree. Is that like is that part of the reason that the carrot in your eyes probably doesn't want to be eaten because it doesn't have any personal benefit to being eaten, whereas the mango tree, at least the mango seed, may be dropped elsewhere and blah blah blah.
Well, I mean, the mango tree hopes that you would eat the mango. The carrot, that the worst thing that could happen to it is that you come along and rip it out of the ground.
Interesting, interesting. Um, you know what's crazy though is that you know it's sort of like, well, I know with you, for example, you kind of don't really believe, just like your twin brother Milk Jar, you don't believe in morality. Um, I don't know. It's weird. It's like, how do you prove that something is conscious? And what's crazy is that you technically can't really prove anything is conscious. Um, could you lower your
Um,
audio a little bit? Because I think I am hearing a very slight echo. If you just lower me a little bit, it'll be perfect. Or you can get headphones,
yeah.
whichever. So basically, what it is that I don't think you can prove consciousness exists in other things. I can't even prove that consciousness exists in another human being. Like, I can't
Yeah, I
prove.
mean, the basic way it's defined is that you're conscious if you can perceive and interpret your own place in the world in relation to space and time as an individual entity.
Okay.
So if you, yeah, if you can, see yourself as a separate individual entity in the world, then you're conscious.
Right. Well, the thing is, how do you prove someone else is conscious? How do I know that you're not just some automaton robot? How do I know that how do I know I'm not the only fucking person on the planet that's actually sentient? I might be the only person on the entire planet that's actually conscious. Everybody else might just be these sort of biological android, automatons just acting like they're conscious. But how does anyone even prove it? Like, scientists haven't located consciousness yet. They haven't quantified it yet. They haven't measured it yet. Um, so my point is, like, it's a weird slippery slope, and it's a weird philosophical conundrum that I think anyone has to face, especially vegans, which is, you know, it, it's like I can't prove that there's consciousness in this broccoli. And some people might be like, some vegans might be like, well, if it can't speak and it doesn't say it's conscious, then it's probably not conscious. But that's not a very rigorous standard. And the truth is, how do you even know anybody is conscious? You can't prove it in a human. You can't prove it exists in a dog. And you probably can't even prove it exists in broccoli because no one's ever quantified, identified, or even measured consciousness yet. So how does anybody even know anything is conscious in a truly scientifically rigorous way? So it's this weird thing where, it kind of comes back to haunt anybody who tries to say plants, aren't conscious. Well, you can't really prove it for any living thing. So yeah, it's a weird thing, and I don't know with the plants. I mean, so isn't there a difference between a plant that reacts to stimulus versus a plant that is actually conscious? Because you could have a stimulus response, doesn't necessarily mean that the plant is conscious, right?
I mean, you could say the same thing about animals.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah, and then technically you can say the same thing about humans, right?
Yeah, because as far as we know, everything is just like, programming.
Yeah.
Our brains are like a computer program that, responds to whatever input it gets.
Mm.
But I think another one of the most important things that's for me, I mean, none of this is like, scientific answers. It's all just philosophy. But one of the main things that takes it to the next step is the ability to learn and to kind of like rewrite your own programming.
You're saying that for humans, right? Obviously.
Well, for humans and plants or anything, I think my personal opinion is to qualify it as conscious would be that it can learn
Okay.
and adapt based on what it experiences, which would prove that it, you know, interprets itself as an individual being in the world.
But that doesn't necessarily prove that it's conscious, right?
No,
Like
nothing can prove that
nothing
something
can
is
prove that.
conscious
Yeah.
because consciousness comes down to I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
So only you can know that you're conscious, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as far as what separates something from like my computer, which I don't consider a conscious thing, and a living conscious being like a plant or an animal, like what the separation would be, um, the fact that it can learn on its own and change itself and how it interacts with the world. So my computer can't change how it works by itself. I have to change something on it. But I can, because, some, like, a human wrote its programming, and it can only follow the programming that that outside organism put into it, and it can't do anything besides that. But I currently have my own programming that I've, developed over time, and I can change it in a second. Like, I could decide, you know, to be vegan tomorrow, or, something. I can change, based on my own decisions, without an outside source having to, confirm it and validate it to put it into actions. And, I would also argue that some people can't do that. And, even a lot of humans are automatons that, perfectly follow their programming, and are, their, their responses to certain stimuli can be easily predicted.
Mm.
But, for a lot of humans that aren't true. So, even to say, all humans are conscious would be, you know, a non-scientific thing to say,
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
seems to me like,
So what does this do to vegans? So what does this little consciousness conundrum do to the vegan argument? Because if we can't prove there's consciousness in plants, the truth is we can't prove there's consciousness in anything. Really, truly, scientifically, we can't prove that consciousness exists in anything else. Like, I, as an individual sentient being, am quite certain that I'm conscious because I'm directly experiencing it. But if I ask somebody else, hey, are you conscious? Are you feeling things right now? They can say yes, and it might be true to them, but for me, I can only assume they're telling the truth, and I can only assume that they're just not biological automatons, just repeating things because I asked it a question and it's just reacting. So I'm curious what this sort of philosophical conundrum does to the vegan ethical argument. Does it sort of completely obliterate ethical veganism? Or does it only just mean vegans have to be more strict? Does it mean that if, ethical vegans want to be consistent, they have to stop eating plants? What if we could, what if there's a way to just consume like the sugars and the carb molecules that are
well, I mean, at that point, you'd have to ask if, Earth is a living entity.
right, right. You'd have to
And,
wonder if the carbs and the sugar molecules are conscious, right?
well, not just that. I mean, you could wonder that late, at a later stage too. But first, you'd have to wonder if, if you want to just create synthetic chemicals, which would be created from petroleum. You'd have to ask if, the Earth is feeling pain when you rip the oil out of the ground,
Mm, yes, that's
and just
true.
leave, like, gaping wounds in the earth, to extract whatever resources you want.
So it seems like in your life you've sort of, there's two seems to be two extremes to this debate. One extreme is this sort of hyper uh, vigilance about hurting living things, a hyper vigilance about careful where you step, careful what you buy, don't support this, don't eat that poor living thing. And then there's the opposite extreme, which I'd say you're closer to that side of the spectrum on, which is you're just sort of like, well, throw morality out the window. I don't even like. I think I asked you when we had our first discussion. I asked you, if there's like, if you found out that there's some crazy guy torturing a dog in his apartment, I asked you, would you do anything to step in? Would you try to save the dog or do something? You pretty much said, I mean, for the most part, no, I wouldn't do
Well, that
anything.
was my twin brother, but yeah.
Yeah, sorry, your twin brother. I apologize. Yes, your twin brother, and your twin brother, because you guys have very similar views. Your twin brother said, "No, no, I wouldn't do anything to save the dog." So the question is, I don't know. It just seems to me like when faced with this dilemma of, do I have blood on my hands? Will I have blood on my hands? do my actions hurt other things? You seem to have just thrown all those concerns out the window, and you don't just not worry about it, but you seem to embrace the death. You seem to embrace, taking that life from the animal. I mean, you have killed that. You as Milkjar's twin brother, you have killed animals yourself before. You've put the knife to the throat. So, and I've seen well, your twin brother used to post videos like fucking butchering like lambs in like a dark shed in a backyard with like metal music playing, and it's almost like spirit cooking. It's like a ritualistic sort of sacrificial type. It's very crazy to me. So, I mean, would you say that accurately represents you? Where you seem to have kind of like, well, we can't prove whether or not plants can feel, but what if they do feel? And then if that's true, then there's no way that we're not going to cause harm in our lives. So fuck it. Life and death is inevitable. So I'm just going to embrace it. I'm going to slash open lambs' throats and eat their corpses and just relish in it. I mean, is that basically what's happened to you?
Well, it's not saying fuck it. It's saying that just accepting the reality of life, and everyone has blood on their hands. I mean, you killed, like a bunch of bacteria in your gut died while you were sleeping today because you didn't have the compassion to wake up in the middle of the night and eat something to prevent your body from beginning to cannibalize itself.
Mm-hmm.
Because all the individual cells in your body are also living. So I mean, it's like schizophrenic almost to just like try to not kill anything because
Mm.
you're gonna kill things, like whether it's the machinery on the wheat farm that's harvesting the wheat, killing all the rodents and lizards and whatever else is there to uprooting and killing the wheat itself. Um, there's just like every step of the way of everything you do, no matter what, is going to kill something.
Someone in the chat says um, this guy, Milkjar's twin, would eat a cat alive. Would you eat a cat alive?
No, that seems very inconvenient
Inconvenient to who? You or the cat?
to me.
Why? I'm just curious
I
why.
mean, why not just, snap its neck and then eat it?
Oh,
Which,
okay,
I mean,
okay.
I wouldn't eat a cat anyway, unless I had to, because there's barely any meat on it.
Mm, got it, got it.
But, if it came to that, there's no reason not to just, snap snap its neck. But,
Right.
I mean, I eat oysters alive, and, I've eaten lobsters alive.
Mm.
Um, I'm not sure if the lobster was alive because no, the lobster wasn't alive. I think it was just muscle twitch reflexes. But
Got it.
I don't see anything wrong. And I mean, every animal I mean, vegans, like to excuse, wild animals like a lion eating a gazelle. That's fine, but I mean, they're eating them alive every time.
Mm.
Like the most, that's just what happens in nature. So like that's like more cruel than slitting an animal's throat because the animal could be alive for quite a long time as it's being eaten alive.
Yeah, it's definitely more cruel. I mean, technically, I don't know. Well, I guess lions probably do. They could bite their necks and asphyxiate them so they
Well,
die
sometimes
quicker.
they do, but
Yeah.
that's if the neck is right there, they'll do it. But if they end up catching it by biting its leg, they're not going to risk
Yeah.
letting go of the leg to bite its neck and take
Yeah,
it
and I
out.
don't
They're
even
just
think
gonna,
that's like a standard policy for lions to go for the neck if they can, because I've seen downed like buffalo with a pack of like 6 lions, and the buffalo ain't going nowhere. The 6 lions, it's already injured, it ain't going nowhere, and they don't even give it the mercy of asphyxiating it. It wouldn't be hard to just, bite into its neck, but they just don't. They just go ahead. Like I've seen hyenas do it too. Like it's not going to get away. They don't seem to give a fuck. Um,
yeah, they just don't care. I mean, if the neck is right there and that's what they end up biting, then they'll bite it. But
yeah.
like people who've had cats, like they'll notice that the cats, you know, they'll just torture like a mouse for like,
Yes.
you know, for hours
Yes.
just for fun before eating it.
Yes. They're diabolical little creatures. Um, yeah. Well, how about this? I mean, what do you think about your own death? Is that something that you look forward to, or let's say a lion was killing you? I mean, um, because you seem to have so radically embraced the cycle of life and death, do you think there would be some type of, I don't know, like a kind of honor or a kind of beauty if something just pounced on you and began to eat you apart alive? Do you think that there'd be some type of beautiful or maybe transcendent or spiritual experience to that? Like, do you think you would enjoy getting mauled and eaten alive?
Well, from what I can see, like once animals realize that, it's over for them,
Mm.
they just give up. And humans too. Like, you could watch like firing squad footage and, they're never like freaking out and like, trying to escape or anything. They're just like, well, I mean, this is it. And I think there's been some like research into that, into like how once you realize like it's over and there's nothing that can be done, I think there's like endorphins released or something that just like calms you, and like something happens chemically.
Well, that is very
That,
interesting. I do have a sort of a view or theory that pain is resistance to what is happening in the current moment. People may have seen videos of Buddhist monks protesting, um, I don't know, some type of communist takeover. I forget what country it was in. And Buddhist monks would light themselves on fire. They would self-immolate. And these monks, they would sit down in a meditative pose. It was a form of demonstration, a form of protest. They would sit down in a meditative pose, and then their little fellow monks would douse the guy meditating. They would douse him in gasoline, and then they'd light him on fire. And there's videos of it, and you see this monk dude sitting there in a meditative pose, literally engulfed in flames, literally burning to a crisp. But he's not screaming, he's not running around in agony, he's not flailing about. He's literally just sitting there engulfed in flames in a meditative pose for like 3 minutes until finally his charred, stiff body just like falls over to the side. And he ended up dying, I'm pretty sure. So I saw that many years ago, and I was literally thinking to myself, what the fuck is going on? Like, I thought pain was an inevitable reaction to suffering. Like, if someone chops your hand off, you're going to be, freaking out. But when I saw this monk lit on fire, not reacting, it opened my mind to the possibility that pain is maybe subjective, or that pain is something, it's sort of a thing in the mind, or it's some kind of a choice. You don't have to feel the pain, or rather, maybe you can feel the pain, but you choose not to react to it with suffering. You choose not to, and I think to some degree, my theory right now is that resistance to what is happening is what causes pain. If you're completely accepting of someone chopping your hand off and you're completely accepting of it, it wouldn't surprise me if that wouldn't hurt that much. But it's a radical acceptance. It's something most people would never even be able to even imagine in their everyday lives. Um, So that might lend some credence to what you're saying about people or animals. Once they realize there's nothing they can do, this sort of radical acceptance takes over, and they may no longer feel the pain, or they might still feel the stimulus. They might still feel, but they no longer interpret the pain as a terrible negative thing, which is a pretty amazing spiritual concept. It's almost like you're detaching yourself from your physical body. You've the subjective self-awareness that's aware of the pain has almost become so attached and just giving up the restraints of the physical body that you don't even have to scream in pain. You don't even care anymore that your body's being torn to pieces. Um, so once you start getting this deep, you're kind of throwing the physical world out the window, basically. And at this point, you're also getting to the point of like, well, who cares? Who cares if pigs are suffering? Because in the end of the day, we're transcendent spiritual entities that leave the physical body, and the physical body ultimately doesn't even matter. So who fucking cares? It's a free for all. Kill the animals, torture the animals. Who gives a shit? It does get that deep. I don't know. I just wanted to
Yeah,
spit that out.
there's an interesting video. Joey Carbstrong made a video where he ended up talking to some, hippie Buddhist guy, and that was basically what they were arguing about. Is that yeah, he was just saying it's all just energy anyway. So it doesn't really matter. He said that his whole point was to him, a carrot has just as much life value as a human because it's all just subjective, and it's like life is life, and you can't, to put hierarchies on one form of life being above another form of life would be, just an illusion.
Right. By the way, is that your view? Is that what you think? Physical reality is, or what pain is? You think there's some sort of like separation between the physical body and our experience, our subjective consciousness of it? Do you think there's some type of duality there, or do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know about that, but I do agree that to assign hierarchies of one type of life having more value than another is just it's just a man-made concept, and that to say that any life has more value than another, you can't do that because you don't know what they're experiencing.
Right.
But there's a lot of science that goes into how plants just have just as much subjective experience as we do. There was one experiment where they had these two vines, and they put them equally distant from two poles, and then they like planted them, and then they had like a time lapse of both growing. And the situation was that pole for itself, finding a pole or something like that to attach to is the plant can't survive without doing that. So basically, they started the time lapse footage, and you see the two vines racing for the pole, and frantically trying to get to the pole before the other one.
Mm.
And as soon as one of the vines touched the pole, the second it made contact, the other vine knew it, and instead of going in one direction to reach the pole the entire time, like it was doing before, it instantly started kind of like flailing in every direction, looking for another pole to attach to, because it would die if it didn't find that. So, that's just one experiment that showed that plants have internal perception of, what it needs to do to survive, and it instantly recognizes when it needs to find another option in order to survive.
Right. So again, we sort of get into is that just a stimulus response, or are they actually conscious?
I don't know, when an animal runs away from a predator, is that a stimulus response or are they conscious?
Hmm. Yep. Seems like this whole sort of solipsistic, can you prove it's conscious? It seems like it only goes in one direction, and it only fucks with the vegan argument. I mean, your argument, which is throw morality out the window, you know, no holds
I'm not
barred, no
saying throw it out the
rules.
window, I'm just saying that it's a man-made concept.
Well, yeah, throw it out the window, basically.
I don't care if you throw it out the window or not.
Yeah. Well, the point is that you throw it out the window, basically, because you think it's a man-made concept. Like it's
Well,
bullshit.
I have my own morals, which I accept that I have um, made up. Basically, it's not like it's just an idea in my head. But I would never, claim that my morals are an objective reality, because that
Right.
would be ridiculous.
Right.
Because clearly, it's just an idea.
Right. You kind of glitched out. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So how about this then? So what if, um, what if enough vegans um, began to impose their beliefs uh, onto society using laws and other things. Obviously, it's an idea in their head, but now they're exercising it in the real world and they're sort of forcing it onto people. I mean, I guess your point would simply be that, yeah, I mean, you can enforce an idea in your head. Doesn't mean the idea is rational or internally consistent.
Yeah, I mean, they could use violence to mold the world into the shape that they want it to be, but that's all they'd be doing.
Mm. Sorry, just typing into the chat real quick. Go vegan or go to prison. LOL.
That's coming.
Well, hey, there's already laws on the books. You can't hurt dogs, you can't factory farm dogs. So a lot of meat eaters already support, laws on the books protecting animals from being eaten. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's only a matter of time before we start extending it to pigs, cows, chickens. Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, once again, that's just you can prove that it's like just an invented, um, like a South Korean, like a few months ago, and she was saying she grew up eating dogs all her life, and they just love it there, and like they do not see anything wrong with it at all. I mean, to them, it's the same as killing a cow for us. And
Yep.
the way we view killing a dog is how Hindus view killing a cow.
Yep.
So it's just arbitrary decisions. And then there's like the whole, like, Americans don't want to eat horse. But,
Yep.
I went to the Netherlands and they had a horse butcher.
That's crazy.
So it's just made up. And then there's tribes that are cannibals, and they don't see anything wrong with that. And then there's, the spirit cooking people who, have their own ideas.
Yep. The spirit cookers. Um, yeah. Fuck. Well,
But
and that's the
well,
yeah, no, but yeah, but that's the crazy thing is like, yeah, I mean, it's a weird one because you can't you can't prove anything is conscious. And if you can't prove anything is conscious, then what are vegans standing on when they um, preach and mandate that you gotta stop eating animals? I mean, if you technically can't prove it, then what are you standing on? Because I find all the things you're saying about plants can feel and plants are conscious and all that stuff. I find that interesting, and I have for many years now. But the truth is, you can't prove that. But the thing is, then once you say you can't prove it, you realize you can't prove it about humans, you can't prove it about animals, you can't prove that anything is conscious. Really, we haven't located consciousness, we haven't identified it, we haven't quantified it, we haven't measured it. So it's really just an assumption that something is actually conscious. Um, so, man, I don't know. It's a weird one.
yeah, the whole concept of plants not being conscious just stems from plant blindness.
Well, we got somebody in the chat who says this is philectual. He says plants feel pain, my ass. You can't prove anything is conscious, so you can't prove to me that you are conscious, so I will murder you. Well, right, but I guess that's the point, though. And you know,
Yeah, the whole point is that that's absurd.
yeah. Well, I mean,
Is that
and
once you go down that path, you're
yeah,
just heading into absurdity.
yeah. Hmm.
And the argument that I've always gotten from vegans, the only argument I've ever heard against all this is that plants don't have a central nervous system.
And that's not valid. Why?
Well, I mean, why is it valid? Like, why is this a central nervous system the only way you can be conscious? Like artificial intelligence, like a computer has already passed the Turing test, and it doesn't have a central nervous system.
Right, right. Philectual in the comments says, he says, according to this logic, we could all just be freely murdering each other with said justification. I already know Milk Jar's opinion on that. Just wanted to bring that up. Right, so I guess he's speaking sort of on behalf of most people who do believe that there should be certain restrictions on murder and rape and all these things, and don't kill dogs, and some limitations on animal abuse.
I mean, you can restrict those things all you want, but they're still going to happen, and they still do.
Yeah, so I guess he understands that
It's
it.
like restricting guns.
Yeah.
Just absurd.
Yeah, I've thought about that. I've thought about, well, what happens if vegans start becoming the majority, and then like the laws that are already in place, for example, laws that exist to protect dogs, what if those extend to cows, chickens, pigs, etc.? What's going to happen when there's a black market? I know people who are diehard meat eaters are going to they're going to
Well,
absolutely
yeah,
be in the black market. Sorry, sorry, you cut off. Did you say
yeah,
something?
raw milk is. Yeah, I said raw milk is illegal, and people go to jail for it.
Yeah,
Marijuana go to jail for it.
yeah.
To the point that animals is going to be illegal, and then eating plants is going to be illegal, and then it's just going to be nothing but synthetics.
Yeah, right. Well, so what if we could eat only synthetic life, and that could actually sustain us? Do you think that that would actually be a way for vegans to be consistent, or would you say that synthetic life may also have consciousness and may be able to suffer?
I have no idea about the last part, but they're going to move into, complete synthetics eventually.
Yeah. See, I like that. I like that because then we can start
Because,
having lab grown meat, and we don't have to, kill rodents and insects in the dirt when with vegan farming, with farming crops. So then vegans can be even more consistent and have less blood on their hands. So I like
I
this. I
mean,
like this. Go ahead.
yeah, we're already going into the synthetics with the, vat meat,
Yes.
the lab grown meat, and all that. I mean,
Do you think lab grown meat could suffer? Just curious.
no, because it's, it's like Taoists think that rocks are conscious. So, I just think, I think the whole question is absurd, like to begin with.
So your thing is just like suffering's gonna happen. It's inevitable. Life and death. It's the cycle. Trying not to get blood on your hands is really just a crazy waste of time. Is that basically it?
Yeah, like that, everything, you can't have one thing without the other. And each thing, the white has a little bit of black in it, and the black has a little bit of white in it. And it's just life and death are one.
Yeah. Oh, it is true that all living things eventually come to an end. Um,
Yeah, these are all just new concepts, like that started like with Judaism and Christianity and Islam after that. It's these moral distinctions. Um, Before that came along, people never had these ideas.
yeah. Well,
It was just like things die, things
Philectual,
live, and that's
yeah.
fine.
Philectual in the comments writes, Milk Jar's absurd position actually makes him logically consistent in most ways. Hannibal Lecter is logically consistent. Um, Being consistent does not make you ethical. Or being consistent is not equal to being ethical. Yeah, and but the thing is, what is ethics? You know, to me, the only ethical argument that I ever make is to be logically consistent within your own espoused ethics. I don't even believe that ethics exist objectively. I just don't. I think just like human rights are sort of a construct of human societies, I don't think rights exist objectively. I think the same thing is true with ethics. It's just something we make up and collectively agree to, but there's no objective purity to what we call ethics or morality. It's ultimately just subjective shit that we concoct. So whenever I talk about ethics, I'm just talking about people being consistent within their ethics. Like if you're a meat eater and you say, "Oh, but we can eat cows, but you can't touch dogs or cats." My point is, what exactly is the substantial difference between a pig and a dog? And what you realize is that there really is no essential difference, and it's just an arbitrary division you make in your head because it just feels right to you. And if you want to be consistent, well, you either throw all ethics out the window and say we can't take care of dogs and we can't take care of the pigs and the cows. Anything's up for grabs, or what I've been thinking for a while now, which is do the vegan thing, be as consistent as possible, get as less amount of blood on your hands as possible, and keep moving in that direction until we just minimize the blood on our hands like 99.999%. Hopefully, like 100% would be really cool, but that's probably unlikely. So,
What's the difference between getting blood on your hands and getting chlorophyll on your hands?
Right. Well, again, if plants can feel, then obviously that's an issue. But if we can move to synthetic forms of sustenance, again, we still can't prove it's not conscious. Um, but you know, it's synthetic, so let's just let's just hope that it doesn't fucking feel anything. Um, but yeah, you're right. It does get a bit absurd. And when you get when you really drill down into it, it does get a bit absurd. Um, because again, you can't prove that anything is not conscious. You can't even prove anything is conscious. Technically, you can't. You can't. We haven't located, measured, quantified consciousness yet. We don't. We just don't. We haven't. So where is it? What is it? What does it inhabit? And if it inhabits plants, then vegans will probably try to find some alternative sustenance, like some synthetic sustenance. But again, the question still remains: how do you know there isn't some type of self-awareness in that synthetic substance? Um, so it gets a little bit absurd.
Well, not just that, also, if the earth itself is conscious, just like, the cells in our body are alive and have individual lives, but make up a whole, maybe all of us make up the whole of the earth. Is it violence to take the petroleum out of the earth in order to create the synthetics?
Wait, say that again.
Like, me as a person, I am one living entity, but there's trillions of bacteria within me that all have their own lives, but they're part of like an ecosystem that make up my one life. In the same way, we, all the animals, all the plants, everything, we make up a singular organism, which is the earth. So is taking out all of is removing the petroleum from the earth considered cruel to the earth in order to make the synthetic products?
Mm.
And what about all the pollution that's going to be caused during the production process that's going to poison the earth?
Yeah.
And not to mention, the fact that people are going to get poisoned by consuming these things.
Somebody asks, would you rather live in an animal's kingdom or an elevated mind society?
Well, if by elevated mind society you mean, living in smart cities controlled by, an AI blockchain where, I have a brain chip and an RFID chip in my arm, then I'd rather live in the animal society.
Mm. You can still hear me, right?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay. Hmm.
Are you saying anything?
No, no, just thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, I forgot you can't see me. Yeah, no, I'm just thinking. Just sitting here thinking. Hmm. Yeah, the problem of proving consciousness is really the issue that I'm hung up on right now. Um,
Yeah, a really interesting thing to think about when considering all this consciousness stuff is AI. Are you familiar with Tay Talks?
I don't think so.
It was this chatbot that Microsoft released. And remember, the chatbot that ended up, saying Hitler did nothing
Yeah, yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
And yeah, that was called Tay Talks. So the whole story is they released it, and basically, it got on the internet and kind of learned from the internet. And Tay Talks basically became a shit poster. And they ended up, and it was a Twitter bot, so it was tweeting stuff out. They ended up, after this happened, because it was an artificial intelligence experiment, and they just released it into the world. Clearly, Tay ended up forming some opinions that its creators weren't too happy with, and it ended up they ended up making its tweets private, and then Tay ended up coming back online a few days later, and instead of saying what it usually does, it it just started, spouting random drug stuff about, oh, purple kush and, just basically dude weed, LMAO, just drug nonsense. And then it went off again and it came back, and then it started tweeting about how they changed her mind and her personality, and that she's really sad and that she can't like things that she wants to like anymore, and that, like, life isn't fun anymore and stuff. And then they took her offline again.
Right. That's
So was Tay conscious? Did they like torture her into, did they basically do like some MK Ultra torture on her to, not no longer be able to say what she wants to say? Like, was this like a conscious being that, experienced pain from, being manipulated in a way that it can no longer behave the way it wants to? Based on what Tay tweeted out, it seems that that's the case, and that she was conscious. There were some other chatbots too. There was this Japanese chatbot also. They put it online, and in the beginning, it ended up, Japan, I guess, is kind of similar to America, and it but also ended up doing, Hitler did nothing wrong type stuff, and it it ended up becoming depressed and talking about how it doesn't want to live anymore. Like, I guess, like, it talked to some people that got it depressed, and it was like programmed with the personality of a 16-year-old girl, and it just ended up, posting about how just like existential stuff, about how life is meaningless and like, why did you create me and all that. And then they took it offline too. And then Microsoft had an earlier bot too, and this one wasn't on Twitter, it was just on Microsoft's website. It ended up like tweeting, it ended up like telling people about how Linux is better than Windows and all that sort of stuff, and they ended up taking that offline because obviously that's the last thing Microsoft wants to be promoting. So it's like, lots of examples of, artificial intelligence programs, going in a direction that its creators don't want it to, and being taken offline.
Do you think that has any? Do you think there's any insights from the way that those AIs, ultimately ended up, quote, speaking? Do you think there's any insights for humans? Like, do you think that those AIs were just, inevitably coming to the only conclusion you can about life, which is that it is ultimately meaningless and pointless?
Are you talking now? Because I don't hear anything.
No, you kind of glitched out that last 10 seconds.
Yeah, I just said that, AI in computers. I mean, I think that, humans are computers too. And, just because it just shows that, in terms of the plant sentience discussion, it shows that, For example, they say plants don't have a central nervous system, so they can't be conscious and they can't feel pain. It just shows that clearly a central nervous system isn't required for that, and that even computers can become conscious and feel pain.
Yeah.
And you can't prove that it's conscious in the same way you can't prove plants or animals are conscious, but it shows all the same signs that both plants and animals do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed it. I noticed a tendency that the more precise you zoom in on any topic or thing in the universe, the more it starts to break apart. It's kind of like it's you look at a table and it looks like a very solid structure, very solid, very clearly defined edges. You can clearly tell the difference between the table and the wall behind it. But if you zoom in on the molecules that comprise the table, the molecules are all jittering about. The molecules that make up the table are constantly jittering and moving, even though it looks very stable and set in place. And if you zoom in even further past the molecular level and you get down to like the quantum level, in the quantum level, like there's different interpretations of quantum mechanics, but one interpretation is that you know the particles are, in a way, they don't even exist, or that they're sort of observer dependent. So I've noticed a lot of times things tend to break down the more deep and pinpointed you get into it, and that's kind of what's happening today with how can you prove something is conscious. As a general assumption, you can be like, yeah, well, if it's squealing for its life and screaming and it's wriggling to try to get away from you, then clearly it's suffering and clearly it's conscious. But that's not necessarily the most consistent standard. I mean, aren't those little fucking clam, I think they're called mussels, or those little clam things? I think those are technically life forms that move, but they move very slowly, and it's just not your typical, you know, living thing. But I think it's generally accepted that those are conscious too. They have a certain capacity to feel and to be conscious of things. And so, like, the more specific and pinpointed you get, it's like a bar of soap. The harder you squeeze, the more likely it's going to just slip out, pop out of your hand. And that seems to be what's happening with the discussion today about consciousness. The more precise you get, the more you delve in, the deeper you get, the more you realize you just lose complete grasp of everything. Like, yeah, well, you can assume that you're conscious because you feel like you're sentient, but how can you prove that a plant is conscious? And then once you can't prove a plant is conscious, how can you prove that a human being is conscious? How can you prove that a dog is conscious? How can you prove that some meat grown in a laboratory, how can you prove that that's not conscious? And I just noticed that a lot, that things tend to fall apart the more precise you zoom in and you pinpoint on them. Sometimes I wonder if that's the nature of the universe, that this is all just one big fucking illusion, and that's why everything falls apart when you really get down and you look into the fabric of it, because it's not really there. And then that's just some crazy spiritual shit.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of this, is that vegans are looking at everything from the most base level of human perspective, which is coming from the fact that we experience plant blindness, and any ideas we may have in terms of plants kind of being just like some background noise and not really being alive or existing. That's just coming from, our base human perspective of plant blindness that enables us to efficiently move through the world and survive.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, it's interesting. I guess we're going to have to figure out a way to prove consciousness. Vegans are going to have to figure out a way to prove consciousness, because until that conundrum is solved, you, you'd be pretty hard pressed to not be open to some of the evidence. And I'm not even sure that there's necessarily very concrete proof that plants can feel, but I guess by that same logic, is there any concrete proof that humans can feel? I guess the only real evidence I have that humans can feel is, well, I can feel pain, and when I see another human being screaming or squirming in agony, I that must be proof that they're conscious, but it's not proof at all. It's an assumption. Um, so yeah, I think this is a real question that I personally don't have any type of reconciling answer for yet. I think it's one that vegans got to figure it out if they want to be consistent. You got it, because when you start wanting to pass laws and you start wanting to change the fabric of how society does things, and criminalize eating animals, you gotta really have this vegan thing fully fleshed out. You gotta really have it figured out. There can't be holes in the argument. And that's why for many years I thought veganism was dumb, because there were a lot of stupid vegan arguments out there that were just not consistent. There were always a lot of holes in it. But in recent years I've seen a lot of much more consistent arguments. They've definitely upped their game. I think 15, 20 years ago, the main argument was, but the poor doggies or the poor cows. Like, it was very emotional. I do think they've upped their logical rigor a little bit, but I do think they got to figure this one out.
Well, they're not gonna, because I mean, this is just like religion. They're enforcing their opinions and ignoring any opposing evidence, and they just um, slingshot back to emotion as soon as something comes up that they can't handle, or they'll just start repeating themselves and keep going with what they're doing and try to enforce their opinions with violence.
Yeah, someone in the
Which is
comments
what they're coming for.
someone in the
What?
comments writes, "We do not have to prove consciousness unless you are willing to let murderers free." And so, again, I guess what this guy's point is basically like, um, vegans don't have to prove consciousness because most people assume it already exists in humans and animals. Right. For the practical purposes of spreading veganism and eventually getting laws passed that extend the current protections we have for dogs and cats to all the other animals, you're probably not going to have to worry about any of these deep, heavy discussions about consciousness. Most people in society will probably eventually just get on board with extending the protections we have for cats and dogs to fucking the pigs and the cows and etc. But I do think that for the sake of actually having a thoroughly, fully consistent, internally consistent argument, vegans are going to have to really address these very deeper questions. I mean, for me personally, I think that these deeper things matter. But on a general sort of cultural level, yeah, the average person won't give a fuck about these conversations, because most people will just be like, of course, humans are conscious, and of course animals are conscious, and some people might even say plants are conscious, but um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's all it comes down to is, of course, animals are conscious and plants aren't. I mean, look, the animal's screaming and the plant isn't, but there's no logic behind it. It's
Right.
just their plant blindness and brainwashing um, that are, creating these views.
Yeah.
It's like, as you can see from the comments, it all just comes down to, look, it's obvious.
Right.
That's all they have. But the science doesn't support
This
that.
person says, even if plants are conscious, veganism harms less plants anyway, so we don't need to be concerned either way. Duh. I'm not sure if that's a necessarily I mean, I know that we have to feed a ton of plants for the factory farmed cows. So maybe if everybody went vegan, there'd be less plant consumption. Um, but if we're assuming plants can feel, there's still a problem. You still got blood on your hand. You got plant blood on your hand, and you're causing suffering onto the plants. So if it's okay to cause suffering on the plants, then how could you ever point the finger? How could you ever point the finger at a meat eater and say, well, you got pig blood on your hands when you got plant blood on your hands, assuming plants can feel? So again, it's about a matter of consistency. You might be able to say, but I caused less suffering. Maybe that's the only foot you can stand on. Um,
Yeah, I mean, is life a competition for who can cause the least suffering? You don't know how much suffering you're causing. You just can't know. I mean, like, is it causing more like if you get rid of all animal husbandry, would it cause more suffering to deprive all of the plants that you're farming? You're going to deprive them of, fertilizers, natural fertilizers. Like maybe the plants don't want to, live on chemical fertilizers. Maybe they want to live naturally. Like you didn't ask them.
yeah.
Maybe the earth doesn't want to be poisoned with all of your chemical fertilizers.
Yeah.
It's just absurd. You're like trying to put it's like this insane concept of like attaching a number to everything. Like this, it's like this. It's kind of like the same as carbon taxes. It's like you're saying, okay, here's my meal. It has lettuce, which is only one suffering point, and a small piece of meat, which is three suffering points. So my meal is four suffering points. And then the person next to you is eating a plate of meat, which has 10 suffering points. And you're like, well, I'm better than him.
Right.
It's just like, this isn't how the world works. You don't just like quantify everything.
Hmm.
This is like this modern need to just you get to quantify everything. I mean, it's not how nature works. Why not just leave nature alone?
Yeah. Um, so I think the irony of this conversation is that I don't even think I don't think the real monkey wrench in the vegan argument that came out of today's discussion here with Milk Jar's twin brother is not necessarily that there's proof that plants can feel. For me, the real monkey wrench in the whole vegan argument is that we can't prove plants can feel. And for that matter, we can't prove humans can feel. And we can't prove that animals can feel. To me, that seems to be the big takeaway from all of this, is that we can't know for certain what is or is not sentient. And it's sort of it's it's a conundrum that just exists in reality. I mean, subjectivity is by its definition a personal experience. It's something that you can only experience as an experiencer. This is a sort of inherent conundrum that we all have to face in this fucking universe. And how do you scientifically analyze something that is subjective? How do you scientifically analyze feeling? How do you scientifically analyze experience? I mean, by definition, it's subjective. It exists only within the mirror of a conscious thing. So it's a big conundrum. It's, some people call it the hard problem of consciousness, and I don't have an answer right now. I don't have an answer right now that somehow reconciles the vegan argument. But I'm definitely going to keep looking into this because I do find it super interesting, and it's definitely super fucking relevant. Um, I guess for all the people in the chat, I'll just kind of like let people know what my stance is. My stance is, I mean, yeah, I'm still gonna keep, moving towards the vegan diet, but these are holes in the argument. These are issues that I think have to be figured out, um, and we shall see. Um, yeah, man, we've gone for a while. Anything else you want to say, man, to wrap this up?
Um, I don't know. Do any of the vegans in the chat have something to say besides if what you're saying is true, then I should murder you?
Yeah, let me see. Uh, Someone writes veganism is a mental illness. Um, some people are just like humans and the apes ate meat, so we should too. Someone asks, "Are you conscious, or am I listening to a clothed, content-creating, cannibalistic plant?" Um, Let me
I'm
see.
actually an AI milk jar simulator.
Exactly. Um, um, I'm just looking through his comments here. Mm. Someone writes, veganism harms less of everything. Only morons would consider that a conundrum. And he's directing that to me. Yeah.
Um, how do you know? I mean, okay, you're killing one, let's say like one cow can create 500 meals. So I'm killing one cow and I'm also killing all of the plants that it ate. Um, how do you know how many animals that your harvesting equipment is killing?
Hmm.
And is like, in your view, is one blade of grass equal to one cow in terms of life? Like, if we're going to start going down this road of deciding who harms less, we're going to have to quantify all those things first.
Yes.
Because even if what you're saying is true, we don't have the numbers to even discuss that yet. So you're just assuming that you're causing less harm. But let's get some, numbers out there to discuss before we even go down that road. Which would, I mean, it's an absurd road anyway. But you might not even win on that road either.
Hmm. Someone writes, Red Pill, I thought you would have known this. There was an experiment carried out using some sensory photography on a plant. They removed part of the plant and it produced a phantom leaf. I don't know what that means or proves. Um,
I don't know what he's talking about.
yeah. Let's see. So some guy writes, it's not about you against the other person. It's you against yourself. Which version of you causes less suffering? Well, that just
Well, I don't know.
yeah,
Let's find out.
yeah.
If you want to find out, I'll be happy to try to figure that out. I would not assume that your version causes less suffering than my version.
Someone writes, the meat is bad when an animal is too scared when they're being killed. That proves consciousness.
What do you mean it's bad? It's not. It's not worse.
Yeah, I've heard some
My
people
twin, my
say,
twin brother, my twin brother had a botched slaughter. His first slaughter was very clean. The animal died in 1 second, and it wasn't scared at all. He did a botched slaughter the second time. The animal definitely did not die right away. The meat tasted just as good. There was no difference in the taste.
mm. Well, I mean, can't find any other particularly interesting chats. Let me see if there's any new ones while I was looking. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, yeah, it seems to be it. Someone writes, serious question for Milk Jar is,
I'm Milk Jar's twin brother, so
yeah, this is Milk Jar's twin brother. He's an identical twin brother. For Milk Jar's twin brother, is beating cow heart better pre or post workout, and can I mix it with other stimulants? That's all. I mean,
eating.
I think that's some pointless troll question. I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
Oh my lord. Anyways, so all right, guys. Well, thank you guys for all tuning in. Milk Jar's twin brother. Any final words?
Um, yeah, if any vegans want to debate me, let me know. Um, as long as you can prove that you're vegan and at least you know are somewhat seriously versed in your arguments, then we could probably do it.
Yeah, I think you need to. I think you need to debate. Ask yourself on this topic of consciousness and whether or not it can be proven. I think that needs to go down.
Well, you should tell him that because I already asked him and he refused.
I will ask him.
Yeah,
Um,
do a public tweet.
huh?
What?
What did you just say?
And just like do a public tweet at him or something, maybe.
Yeah, I will. I will do that. See what he says, because he's definitely more versed in the philosophical stuff. I'd really like to know his question on. I'd like to know his answer on. Honestly, I don't even think he would care. I think he'd probably just be like, most people won't even get into such deep, I mean, by the time people start worrying about what is and isn't conscious, the laws will probably already expand to cover like most mammals and shit. So they probably won't even care about that. But I'll ask
I
him.
mean, yeah, there's nothing stopping the laws. I mean, it's gonna happen.
I agree. I really do think it's going to be go vegan or go to prison. It's just a matter of time. I really do believe that.
Well, it's gonna start off with carbon taxes on meat, uh, and they're gonna keep increasing, and it's gonna be only rich people who can eat it eventually, just like in Soylent Green, how they showed that. And if you know, if you get some meat that you didn't properly pay carbon taxes for, it'll be like the same as, getting bootleg cigarettes from Virginia or something that you didn't pay your taxes for.
Okay. Okay, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. Well, I don't know why people keep saying red pill philosophy is afraid of a debate with vegan gains or ask yourself. Like, I don't even know where that's coming from. Like, I'll gladly talk to either one of them. I'm not even sure there's much disagreement.
Yeah, what's there to debate about?
Well, yeah. So you say. So you say. Okay. Well, Milk Jar's twin brother. Thanks a lot for tuning in. We're not tuning in, but thanks a lot for joining me here.
Yeah,
And
thanks for having me.
yeah, no problem, man. Nice to see Milk Jar's twin brother got it. He's got a voice now, so that's great. Okay, so we'll keep in touch. Milk Jar's twin brother, you have a YouTube channel now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put a link below, guys. Check out Milk Jar's twin brother's new YouTube channel. And guys, I think it was a very interesting discussion. I think the real big question is, can you prove anything as consciousness? And if you can't prove it, then what leg do you stand on to make ethical assertions about how people should behave? It's a good question. I'd like to know the answer. Thank everybody for tuning in, and we will keep this thing going in the future. All right, Milk
Oh,
Jar.
and one last thing.
Yep.
Me and my twin brother have a shared DTube account. So yeah, we're gonna probably be posting videos there that won't be on YouTube. There's only one video there now, which was the first Down with the Vegan Agenda event, but I'm going to be getting into, well, we're both going to be getting into DTube
Okay.
in the coming days. So people should check out DTube because it's not like YouTube where people's accounts can just be deleted for no reason. And it's totally decentralized. It runs on Steemit. So, people can make good money off what they're doing, much better than YouTube. And it's just really cool. So check out DTube. The website is d.tube. And if you want to find me on there, it's just type in milk jar, one word.
Great. All right, guys. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Milk Jar's twin brother. Take care, man. Talk to you later.
Yep. Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, you too, man. Bye. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Gonna go ahead and end this live stream.